August 27th, 2015. A quiet Florida neighborhood is suddenly shattered by chaos. Multiple calls flood emergency services, screaming, gunshots, a woman's voice in sheer panic. Inside the home of a young mother of two, something unthinkable is happening. Within minutes, it ends in murder. But the truth is, this horror started long before that day. The warning signs were there, and the system failed to stop it. Amanda Colley grew up in Florida, a strong and independent woman from early on. She built a successful career in e-commerce and worked her way up to a leadership role at Fanatics, where she managed operations. Her co-workers saw her as energetic, driven, and focused. But for Amanda, nothing was more important than family. She and her husband, James Colley, were raising two young boys, Trey, born in 2009, and Avery in 2011. Amanda was the kind of mom who showed up. For school, for soccer, for everything. She created a home filled with stability and support. James Colley, on the surface, looked like a model husband. He worked as an auditor for Citibank, always dressed sharp, always polite. People thought he had it all together. But behind closed doors, James was a different man. There was jealousy. There was drinking. There were moments of anger that didn't match the image he showed the world. And yet, no one saw the danger coming. One of Amanda's closest friends was Lindy Dobbins. She had moved to St. Augustine a few years earlier with her husband, Christopher. They had 3 kids of their own and were settling into life in the suburbs. Lindy worked as a manager at a Crocs outlet. Everyone loved her energy and the way she made people feel welcome. Amanda and Lindy met not long after Lindy moved into the neighborhood of Murabella. At first, it was just neighborly chats, but over time, they became best friends. Their kids played together, their families grew close, and Amanda leaned on Lindy more and more, especially when things with James started getting worse. Murabella was the kind of place people moved to for peace of mind. Manicured lawns, quiet streets, a shared pool, tennis courts, basketball hoops, running trails, everything a young family could want. Neighbors would wave from driveways, catch up around the playgrounds, or by the pool. On the outside, it looked like the perfect place to raise a family. But on that August morning, perfection shattered. The picture-perfect life in Murabella was propped up by a carefully built routine. Morning school drop-offs, team practices in the afternoon, weekend games, and the occasional homeowners meeting organized by the management company. Most adults commuted to Jacksonville for work, returning in the evenings just in time to see the neighborhood come alive again, yards filled with kids playing until the streetlights flickered on. Strict community rules and limited access for outsiders gave families a sense of safety and predictability. In this peaceful setting, Amanda and James Colley looked like the ideal couple. They were often seen cheering from the sidelines at the local sports fields with their sons, Trey and Avery. The parents weren't just involved. They were organizers, volunteers, the kind of people neighbors trusted. To most, the Colleys were everything a family should be. But cracks were starting to show beneath the surface. Behind the smiles were tense conversations. The rhythm of their life, once so stable, began to falter. Unplanned absences, canceled practices, a door that stayed shut for days. Neighbors picked up on subtle shifts. The contrast between the family's sunny public image and what was happening inside their home grew harder to ignore, even as the rest of the community carried on as usual. By early 2015, Amanda and James's marriage had entered a breaking point. Jealousy had become a constant presence. Anytime Amanda left the house, whether it was a work meeting or catching up with friends, James saw it as a threat to their family. Friendly gatherings, even business calls, would trigger accusations. He started pushing Amanda to cut ties, to isolate herself. He wanted to control every part of her life, where she went, who she talked to, even how she spent her time. His drinking only made things worse. Under the influence, James was volatile. His words turned sharp. He'd shut down mid-conversation or suddenly launch into long, bitter arguments that stretched deep into the night. One evening might end in a screaming match over something trivial. The next morning, he'd act like nothing ever happened. It was a cycle that left Amanda and the entire household emotionally drained and constantly on edge. Amanda tried to hold it together. She kept the kids on a routine, kept the household running. She avoided confrontations when she could. But nothing she did made the problem go away, only delayed it. The emotional strain kept growing. James's jealousy morphed into something more obsessive. Every social interaction Amanda had outside their home became a point of conflict. Every friend, every work call, every outing, he demanded explanations for everything. Amanda found herself constantly having to justify things that once felt normal, like seeing a friend or attending a team meeting for the boys. What once looked like a solid marriage was now unraveling in silence. And behind closed doors, things were quickly spiraling out of control. July 13th, 2015, Amanda Colley decided to put an end to it. She filed for divorce in St. Johns County, Florida, stating that she could no longer ensure a safe and stable environment for herself and her children due to the constant pressure and unpredictable behavior of her husband. After filing for divorce, Amanda found someone she could lean on, Lamar Dudley. He didn't get involved in the conflict with her ex-husband, but he provided vital support in daily life, helping with the kids, driving them to practice, and organizing family outings. With Lamar's help, Amanda finally found some relief and the chance to build a new life without constant fighting. Still, Amanda made every effort to keep these changes hidden from James Colley, afraid that any mention of her personal life would trigger another wave of tension. To avoid this, she avoided taking pictures with Lamar, stayed away from places James might frequent, and asked her friends to keep everything private. Her meetings with Lamar were carefully planned to not overlap with James's scheduled visits with the kids. The line between past and present remained blurred. James continued to show up at the house because of the parenting schedule, even though they were no longer living together. On those days, Amanda did everything she could to maintain peace. At times, in an effort to reduce aggression and keep the situation under control, she gave in to physical contact with her ex-husband. This wasn't an attempt to restart the relationship. It was a calculated move to prevent emotional outbursts that could affect the children. For the kids, the daily routine stayed mostly the same: practices, homework, playdates. Amanda carefully coordinated the father's visits, the boys' schedules, and time with Lamar to minimize any confusion and keep the children from being caught in adult conflict. At the end of July 2015, while Amanda was away for the weekend, James Colley entered her home without permission. He took her clothes from the closet and burned them in the backyard. This marked a shift from verbal pressure to direct interference with her property and private life. When Amanda returned, the threats escalated. James said he would end her life if he found out she was with another man. He threatened to harm her dog. He threw a bag at her. He took medication that belonged to her. He broke into her parents' house looking for her and flooded her phone with calls and messages demanding explanations. In an attempt to avoid provoking more aggression, Amanda denied being in a new relationship. Along with the divorce, Amanda filed a request for a temporary protection order. The court ordered James Colley to cease all contact, stay away from her home and workplace, avoid using others to communicate with her, and surrender any firearms, including hunting rifles, 2 pistols, and an AK-47, according to Amanda's statement, to the St. Johns County Sheriff's Office. This information was critical for assessing the level of danger. After the destruction, James began looking for proof to support his suspicions. He found men's clothing that didn't belong to him, along with personal items that had appeared in the house since the couple had started living apart. To him, these discoveries were evidence. Confirmation of everything he had convinced himself of over the past few weeks. What followed was a string of phone calls filled with voicemails, angry, accusatory, and laced with thinly veiled threats. James accused Amanda of being dishonest and warned that she was lucky he hadn't exposed her real character to the kids. His tone was harsh and demanding. He wanted answers, and he wanted them immediately. Amanda didn't respond, and that only made things worse. The messages kept coming, back to back, a real-time unraveling. He bounced between rage over the things he'd found, to guilt-tripping, to intimidation. In some of the recordings, he hinted at putting an end to this, which, given the past threats and escalating behavior, started to sound like a clear and present danger. On the morning of August 27th, James Colley stood in front of a judge, facing charges for violating a protection order. He showed up in a business suit, with his bank ID still clipped to his jacket, looking like a model citizen. The hearing followed standard procedure. The court verified identities, checked for prior offenses, and asked routine questions about mental health and substance use. James answered calmly, saying he wasn't under psychiatric care and hadn't used alcohol or any medications. The session went by without any mention of what had happened the night before at Amanda's house. The prosecution pointed to the violation of the order. The defense focused on Colley's clean record and professional background. At this point, there were no documented mentions of illegal entry, threats, or signs of escalating danger in the official case file. Based on the principle of minimal sentencing for first-time offenders, the court ordered Colley to attend anger management classes and maintain distance from Amanda Colley. He was also warned that contacting her through others would still count as a violation. On paper, the ruling seemed reasonable: clear conditions, corrective measures, and a defendant who appeared capable of compliance. But that's exactly where the false sense of safety came in. The real threat, the growing intensity of James's behavior, wasn't reflected in the court's assessment. The system focused on surface-level indicators of stability: a steady job, a clean appearance, confident answers. It missed the pattern of control. It missed the danger beneath the surface. On the morning of August 27th, just after a court hearing where James Colley was once again reminded to stay away from his estranged wife, he violated that order. At 9:41 a.m., he placed a call to Amanda Colley. The conversation lasted about 14 minutes. There's no transcript of what was said, only the call's duration and the fact that it happened immediately after he left court. While the content of the call remains unknown, the timing suggests it may have involved a last-ditch attempt to reconcile, pressure to drop legal actions, mentions of the children, or even threats if she refused. What followed supports this theory. James abruptly changed his plans for the day and abandoned any intention of returning to work. There's no indication Amanda agreed to meet, and the events that unfolded later strongly suggest otherwise. Shortly after the call, James stopped at a gas station. He filled up his car and bought beer, a move that pointed to a trip that had nothing to do with his job. Between 10 a.m. and 11 a.m., he headed toward Amanda's house on South Bell Drive, violating the court order that prohibited him from going near her home. What's critical here is that James never returned to his own house. He didn't stop to grab anything. The weapons were already in the car. 2 loaded handguns, a 9mm and a .45 caliber, were with him, meaning this wasn't spontaneous. He was prepared. The moment the call ended, he was already on his way with deadly intent. Carrying those firearms directly contradicted the court's ruling and his earlier claims that he no longer had access to any weapons. That phone call marked a turning point. Before it, he was just another man in a suit, leaving court with orders to take anger management classes. After it, he was in motion, making choices that pointed to premeditation. There were no signs of de-escalation. He didn't call his attorney, didn't notify the court, didn't go back to work. Every action pointed in one direction. The call became the trigger. the spark that set the plan in motion, the call, the drive, the weapons. That same morning, Amanda Colley was dealing with the aftermath of the chaos James had left behind the night before. She was visibly shaken, crying, saying she was afraid to walk back into the rooms where everything had been torn apart. Lamar Dubley was by her side, helping her gather scattered belongings and taking photos of the damage on his phone. They talked about what to do next, but Amanda said she wanted to consult her mother and her attorney first. Around 9:55 a.m., a support specialist arrived to assess the scene. Seeing signs of forced entry and the state of disarray, he walked Amanda through the process of filing an official complaint. But Amanda, worried about how things could affect James and, more importantly, their sons, Trey and Avery, wasn't ready to go through with it right away. The specialist left after documenting the facts and giving her advice. Rachel Hendricks and Lindy Dobbins soon arrived at the house to support Amanda. After walking through the rooms and taking note of the damage, they offered to help clean up and get things back in order so the kids wouldn't come home to such chaos. The three women discussed how to secure the entrances, where to store the keys, and how to divide up responsibilities for the rest of the day. Though the need to file a formal police report was mentioned several times, Amanda stayed firm. She wanted to talk to her family and her lawyer before making any decisions. In the open-concept living room and kitchen, a bright space overlooking the backyard, the women got to work. They swept up glass, gathered what was still intact, and checked the locks. They mapped out a short-term plan: wait for legal advice, don't stay alone, and handle basic household tasks to reclaim some control over the situation. Despite how vulnerable the house was, it still felt safe, at least on the surface. The backyard wasn't visible from the street, and the sliding glass door offered little protection. But the earlier visit from the support specialist, combined with the presence of friends, created a false sense of security. It felt like the worst had already passed, like they could finally breathe and focus on cleaning up. But James Colley was already on South Bell Drive. He had 2 loaded handguns in his vehicle. Avoiding the front of the house where he could be seen, he pulled around to the back. He crossed the lawn, staying close to the fence line, and approached the patio's glass door. As he neared the house, James opened fire. He shouted, "Where is he?" clearly looking for Lamar Dubley. The glass shattered violently, gunshots echoed through the house, and panic erupted. Lamar immediately realized what was happening and yelled for everyone to run. He made it out through the garage and escaped, sprinting away from the house. A neighbor's security camera captured his movement down the street. Once outside, he called emergency services, reporting an armed attack at Amanda's address. Inside, the women moved quickly, following the basic plan they'd discussed earlier. Amanda, Rachel, and Lindy moved away from the open areas and headed for the bedroom, hoping to lock the door and buy time until help arrived. They split up to hide. Amanda locked herself in the master bathroom, while Rachel and Lindy ducked into the walk-in closet, bracing the door shut from the inside. At the same time, calls to emergency responders started flooding in. Amanda, from the bathroom, called the rescue service. The operator could hear screams and instructed her to stay on the line. Lindy tried to call from inside the closet. Dispatch began receiving multiple calls from the same block. There was already Lamar's report from outside, and now 2 near-simultaneous calls from women inside the home. At first, different operators handled them separately, but the bigger picture began to come together in real time. Meanwhile, James Colley moved through the house, yelling Amanda's name and demanding to know where Lamar was. The first minutes of the break-in would decide everything that followed. The intruder was already inside. The sliding glass door had been blown apart. Emergency services were on the line. One witness was outside, confirming the address. But inside, the 3 women were split between 2 hiding spots, making coordination almost impossible. Police units were on their way, but there were still precious minutes left. Minutes the attacker used to hunt and intimidate inside the house. Moving quickly through the home, James Colley kept calling out for Lamar Dubley. He reached the master bedroom. The closet door wouldn't budge. Inside, Rachel Hendricks was holding it shut with her foot. James warned that he would shoot if they didn't open up. Then he fired at the door. Splinters and shards cut Rachel's hand, weakening her grip. The door burst open. Behind a low chest in the closet, Lindy Dobbins tried to stay out of sight. Rachel made a run for the door as James, still standing in the bedroom doorway, leveled his gun at the woman left behind. He fired 3 shots, short bursts with pauses. The sound was picked up by the emergency dispatchers still on the phone with the victims. Rachel managed to get out of the house and reach a neighbor's home, giving the address and confirming shots had been fired. James then moved toward the bathroom attached to the bedroom, where Amanda Colley was locked inside and still on the line with dispatch. He fired into the door and stepped in. The first bullet didn't take her life. She was still breathing, still conscious. More shots followed from his 9mm, emptying the magazine. But James didn't stop. He drew his second handgun, a .45 caliber, and fired 5 more rounds. The series of hits left Amanda Colley no chance of survival. The brutality of his actions was clear. He kept going, even when she was completely helpless. James Colley didn't stay at the scene. He left before the patrol cars arrived, got into his car, and drove away from the neighborhood. On the road, he called his father and sisters, telling them he had to kill Amanda Colley, shifting the blame to her. She was going to send me to prison. She left me no way out. He didn't even mention Lindy Dobbins. Her death was treated as irrelevant to his story. His tone was calm, without any trace of regret. Meanwhile, dispatchers were processing a flood of calls, from Lamar Doublé outside, from Amanda Colley and Lindy Dobbins inside, and from neighbors Rachel had reached. Police units were already en route, and nearby schools had gone into lockdown. But precious time had been lost. The armed attacker had carried out his plan and escaped. With information now consolidated, dispatchers issued an alert naming James Colley as an armed suspect. Patrols were instructed to track his possible routes. The search extended beyond the county. The alert described a man who had just left the scene of a violent crime, driving a vehicle with Florida plates. Communication channels between departments lit up, and warnings about the danger were sent to neighboring states. That evening, the first alert came in from Virginia. A woman driver reported that a car with Florida plates was following her. She described the driver's behavior, swerving dangerously close, trying to push her off the road, while she had 3 small children in the back seat. She told dispatchers she feared for their lives. The information was passed to state patrol units, who confirmed the match with the suspect they'd been looking for. Highway patrol crews moved to intercept the vehicle. The stop followed standard procedure: flashing lights activated, verbal commands to pull over, and visual control of the driver's hands. James Colley did not resist. He complied with instructions and was taken into custody without force. Officers suspected he might be under the influence of alcohol, consistent with the behavior described by the witness. During the initial interaction, James Colley quickly shut down, stating he would only speak through an attorney. His communication was minimal, his answers short. An experienced investigator later noted in her report his unusual coldness. No visible reaction to the gravity of the charges, a flat tone, a calm posture. In the context of a double homicide, his demeanor was deeply unsettling. From there, procedures were by the book. Florida authorities were notified, transport arrangements coordinated, and chain of evidence protected. The first impressions of Colley were formally documented: emotional detachment and no outward signs of remorse. While in custody, James Colley frequently called his family. Instead of admitting guilt, he built a narrative of justification, shifting blame to others and framing what had happened as a mistake. In conversations with his relatives, he accused Amanda Colley of leading him to prison. When family members tried to talk about the impact on the children, he deflected to his own problems. asking them to handle his property and reputation instead. Meanwhile, conversations inside the jail block were also noted. Cellmate Andrew Cherry reported that Colley made contemptuous remarks about the victims, claiming Amanda Colley and Lindy Dobbins got what was coming to them. He did not use any wording suggesting regret. On the contrary, he emphasized that he acted the way he had to. These statements would later be compared to the pattern of injuries and the sequence of gunshots. Another thread involved the children. James Colley instructed his family to block efforts to transfer custody to Amanda Colley's relatives. He urged them to speed up legal moves on his side and insisted that access by his late wife's family to the children be restricted while he sorted things out. Even from behind bars, he was trying to influence family and legal decisions. All of these records painted the same picture: a defendant with no sign of remorse, emotionally cold, and determined to manipulate the situation in his favor. In the summer of 2018, the trial of James Colley began. The hearings stretched on for months as each side worked to shape its own version of events. The defense argued that Colley, under the influence of alcohol and the sleep aid Ambien, acted without full awareness. His attorneys focused on his clean record, his career at the bank, and his outwardly spotless reputation, insisting that what happened was spontaneous and not premeditated. The prosecution laid out an unbroken chain of evidence: the unlawful entry into Amanda Colley's home, the threats, the phone call immediately after court, and his armed arrival at her house. Survivor Rachel Hendricks gave a detailed account of how Colley opened fire, taking the lives of Lindy Dobbins and Amanda. Her testimony was backed by recordings of calls to emergency services, capturing screams and gunshots in real time. Forensic experts confirmed the calculated nature of the killings: 2 separate handguns, targeted shots, no signs of chance. Recordings of Colley's phone calls from jail further undermined the defense's claim of regret or loss of control. By the end of the hearings, it was clear the jury faced a decision that would determine the rest of his life. On the day of the verdict, the courtroom was packed. After deliberations, the jury found James Colley guilty on all major counts: the intentional killings of Amanda Colley and Lindy Dobbins, violating a protective order, and unlawful use of firearms. Prosecutors called for the death penalty, emphasizing the cruelty of the crimes and the danger he posed to society. The defense pleaded for a lesser sentence, citing his mental state at the time. The judge sided with the prosecution. James Colley was sentenced to death. As the sentence was read, he remained outwardly calm, showing no visible emotion. Around him, there were tears, and the victims' families spoke aloud about finally seeing justice done. After the sentencing, the families of the victims spoke. Christopher Dobbins, who had lost his wife, talked about their 3 children left without a mother, how every holiday and milestone would now be marked by her absence. Amanda Colley's family shared their own grief, noting that her sons, Trey and Avery, had lost their mother and that no court decision could ever bring her back. They stressed the importance of keeping her memory alive, both within the family and in the community. Thanks for watching, everyone. Your support means a lot to me, and you can help my channel grow by hitting that like button, dropping a comment, and sharing this video. Your engagement really makes a difference. See you soon.